said, construction and operations, all the
Can you hear me? Yeah.
personnel who are required for the different things, do they need to have the same skill set? What do they do once one is over and take over something else?
Yeah, you can achieve this in different ways, but the operating staff that you need, we chose to have them both as the people who install and maintain equipment as well as operate it. And the reason for that is, again, driven by the time constraints. When things go wrong, what you need to have is people who can close their eyes and imagine what's inside the chambers and how the electronics is wired up and stuff like that, because they did it. Now, you can achieve that by hiring those people before you need them to operate, to participate in some of the end stages of construction, or you can achieve it by basically taking people from the construction project and at some point say, as of such and such a date, we would like you to join the operating team instead of the construction team.
Okay. But the numbers required are similar both during the operations and construction.
Yeah, totally the same. You get into trouble if you try to have separate teams that do maintenance and operations and installations, because then you've introduced effectively seasonality. When you're in an observing run, what do the maintainers do? And, what do the installation crews do? And so that's why we made the decision that, it'd be one set of people, they would have all those skills. And it also gives them the skills to be better operators.
Final question. We discussed in council meetings, LIGO council meetings many times, about people going from US sites to Indian sites to help out. How does that impact on the lack of personnel that might be in the LIGO-India project?
Yeah, so I think, obviously LIGO-India is important to the LIGO lab, but if you look at schedules, we're trying to get A+ operating in time for LSST. And so there is going to be, if the entire LIGO lab can spare one postdoc, that'll be about it. And, that doesn't mean that there can't be other people who come in from the collaboration. The collaboration is not deep in, expert commissioners who, are now professors who might take a sabbatical or something like that. But Stefan Ballmer is an example of someone who has done that over the years, even within the LIGO lab. Exactly. So I think there can be some support, but I think the right strategy is India should be prepared to stand completely on its own and then take advantage of that as extra muscle rather than depend on that muscle showing up.
I'll just, in the order of hands raised, let's go to Patrick Dasgupta.
Yeah. So this question is for all the speakers. Of course, during the science run, LIGO or the LIGO-India, one would require incessant electrical power supply. So in India particularly, that requires a backup system. But if one has in situ electric power supply system, that might create a noise in the detector. So the LIGO experience probably would reveal some of these things, that if you have an in situ power supply generator, what kind of noise that comes in and shows up in the detection system.
Yeah, well, I'll just be very quick. In the U.S., we don't use generators. We go down when the electrical system goes down.
Yeah, so I mentioned this 5 megawatt requirement. This is a dedicated line we are getting over 16 kilometers, which is supposed to be free of disturbances, apart from major failures at the grid level. And we have some thoughts about, having solar power generation on the site, but that is something that we will be taking up. So we don't have plans for a generator other than in emergency situation where, we need to bring it down. But certainly we will also follow a policy where there's no power generator working while we are taking data.
Just commenting that this site is fortunate to be pretty close to a major dam and a hydroelectric project. So that supplies the water as well as the dedicated electrical line. And one of the first things we took up in this project was to actually make sure that happens. So that will help us. Who was next? You were next.
Yeah. So, after yesterday's public talk, I had some interaction with the younger students from the nearby college, and my interaction with other undergrads. Without exception, almost everybody asked, how can we be part of LIGO-India? We are from engineering background, we know nothing about GW, what institutes to tap in, where to look, what to brush up our... So, since Ajith also mentioned about tapping, increasing ISR and IIT students, anything we are looking into how to increase the outreach boundaries within those areas?
I'll start responding to and then pass it on to if Tarun wants to look at this. I mean, this work has started. Certainly, there has been quite a lot of exposure in various institutions targeted to engineering institutions like the IITs and engineering colleges. Right now, there's a week-long meeting going on in Pune called Engineering Applications in Astrophysics, where LIGO plays a very major role. The participants are all BTech and MTech students. This needs to be scaled up, of course, in a much bigger way. There is no doubt, even when we see in social media, our social media presence started quite early, that there is a huge amount of interest amongst young people. It's a question of channeling them to such programs. So we are coming up, of course, with basic experiment-oriented training programs. We are in the middle of designing a major nationwide hackathon, for example, based on interferometry and LIGO-related problems to get people working in groups at the BTech level. This is not going to solve the problem of building the groups for assembly and characterization of LIGO-India, but this builds the human resources for the generation that's going to come and use it. I think there are also, as Tarun mentioned, in the LIGO-India Road Ahead meetings, which should be resumed soon, I suppose, in the associated institutions, there are 15 other institutions working with us in this. There has been some effort in generating interest in the young people who are part of this institution.
You covered the fact that there is a LIGO-India training and R&D program that has some money from the seed money that we got. And so in a limited way, we have started this. And already at Ayuka, there are 4-5, people working at ICER, where there is a training laboratory. ICER Kolkata wants to set up something like that. And I'm hoping in time, we will have a network of undergraduate places which will set up some kind of lab with a particular syllabus. I was talking to Rana about setting up some kind of lab manual and the syllabus, where at least we can ensure a basic level of training is uniformly done over every place, and every place will add to it its important, specific flavor. That said, we have a lot more interested people than we have. You're one of the examples. So we had long back, we had sort of set up a network of, whatever contacts we had at IITs to identify people who may be, kind of quickly got onto the field. And your thing came out of such a thing. But we haven't done it programmatically yet. And that is a challenge. And I think even if we do a program, it's very important to keep it, make sure that individual level we are pushing. The program can do only so much.
to contribute to this? Yes, Abhay. And then we're good, Chris. Abhay is nearer. Oh, Chris already has the mic.
So this is related. Are there opportunities for the global community of gravitational wave institutions to help with the training of this first generation of LIGO-India scientists in terms of training PhD students to complement the efforts that are going on within India?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely necessary. Let me address that. I mean, you know, the things that are in place already. You are part of, for example, the Newton Bhabha project between the UK and India, which has started more than a year ago, where significant exchange of young people has already happened, where people have gone from India into institutions like, for example, Glasgow, your institution, and spent some time there. This easily, I mean, we are currently funding limited to some extent in this, and the Newton Bhabha funds provide quite a lot of resources for this to be scaled up. It hasn't gone into a joint PhD program yet, but it is actually manned by PhD level students and young postdocs who have taken part in this. Now, the corresponding thing that needs to be set up, and we are in talks with the Indo-US funding body, the IUSSTF, about this, including Mark Coles on the side of NSF, who are trying to figure out whether we can have a joint PhD program where we can have a bunch of PhD students spending equal amounts of time in India and in one of the LSC institutions, particularly the ones that contribute to the instrumentation activities. That's something that needs to start. Can we go to Abhay next?
Okay, so I mean,
Oh, so you want to?
That was a mess. This went into the backup slides this morning, but this actually lays out the training and R&D program both for Akshat and you to know, and this has a huge contribution from the Newton Bhabha thing. It just happened to be slipped into the backup slides.
Yeah, I think content knowledge is good, right? And the thing about content knowledge is you can train people in it, right? And so that's the easy part. I was telling Patrick over dinner that, you know, the ideal way to identify people who would be successful in an observatory is too cruel to do. What you would do is you would hire people with the right paper qualifications, and you would charter an airplane, and you would fake an accident where you wreck it on a deserted island, and you wouldn't come to pick them up for a year. And then you would hire all the survivors, okay? So you can't do that. It's too cruel. But what you can do, which is actually not even cruel, but kind, is you can provide internships for students starting at undergraduate stage, where you emphasize not studying, not solving paper problems, but actually accomplishing something, right? And so I can tell you, I did it in my lab, Rana does it in his lab, when I had a lab, and Ray Weiss did it in his lab when he had a lab, is you get a student, you talk to them about something to do, and a week later you ask them what they've done. Okay, and when they tell you what they read or something like that, you say, no, I meant, what did you do, right? How did you start accomplishing things? And that's an important skill to learn, is that you don't solve problems by spending forever studying them and reading books and, you know, consuming like you're watching TV. You have to get out and actually engage. And that's a personality thing that you have to develop, and a rigor of action. And to really do that, that's the hard thing, is to identify people who can do that successfully. And then pull in the knowledge as they need to pull it in. Rather, you can't spoon feed that. Bye.
yeah, so first of all, I want to thank all the panelists very much for being candid, and really, on the one hand, it is golden opportunity, unheard of opportunity. On the other hand, the other side of the coin is such great challenges, and it's really wonderful to hear all these quantitative aspects of the challenges, you know, how many people one needs, training and such. I just had sort of a couple of small comments. The first is that we heard about ISRO from you, and you had this suggestion at the end about the management
and how one should not go by hierarchy and so on. We should try to find the best people who would be in charge of projects. But I think that also goes for the whole project director, not just for the and I think that somehow is sort of delayed, and I don't know what one should do, but one really needs to do that, not worry about hierarchy, etc., and find the best person to direct the whole project. And I think that's somewhat urgent now, as Fred has told us before. The second thing is that, there are all these initiatives for training, but as Ajith said, we really need to scale it up so much, and that's a challenge that should go on. But as I see it, I think the immediate future, which is really, installation of the detector and getting the thing running so that we actually have the detector is actually online and so on. That, I think, challenge somehow, I don't know, from what I understand, one is really a little bit way too behind here. I mean, to really get adequate technical people and really set up and have this technical expertise and so on. In the US, of course, when the whole thing started, I mean, gravitational physics had no any experience with management of large projects or anything. And there was a great influx from high energy community, for example. So one was able to attract these people because of the intellectual challenges and such thing. But then, of course, there was also a need to focus the effort, to, as many people said, that they are very diverse things, and one needs to unify them, to speak the same language, understand that they are solving the same problem. One of the things that NSF had done was to create these physics frontier centers, and we had the first physics frontier center at Penn State, and it was about gravitational waves, and our mission, our charge was really to create this community. Exactly the problem was that there were people who were fragmented, and how to bring them together. So this is not sort of a training. This is really high-level people who are already researchers, perhaps in some other areas, like optics, materials, suspension systems. They don't understand what is really required for gravitational waves and such thing. So I think such targeted program would be very, very useful for, to really jumpstart the thing that is needed for the immediate next 5 years, which is really the commissioning this new project. And as Fred said, the challenges are really quite high because the detector has been upgraded so many times, and we are not getting that upgraded version, so we need to really get on this thing. So perhaps some budget, part of the budget, could be set up to not just this training. In addition to that, it really is directed towards getting expertise from perhaps outside communities into the field.
So I completely agree with you that everything that we have been talking about here is for young people to learn about the project and to become experts, etc., where the time scale would be like 5 or 6 years. Whereas if we, for the construction phase, for installation of the detectors, we're talking of a time scale of 2 years from now, because that's the time that it should begin. The thought is that places like RRCAT already have the experts, and IPR has the experts, and they would help us. But the problem there is that everybody there is already committed to about 120% of what they can deliver. And so we have got to sort of get them out of that. And I can't see how that can be done systematically. So we really need to try to hire engineers from the private sector, for example, and give them jobs. And so the first thing to do would be to set up, to hire a few people who are very senior. And then there are a lot of people who are retired now, and because of new government policies, people are retiring a few years earlier than they had anticipated. And some of them are highly competent and very willing to work. And then those people can help us actually to locate younger people who are experienced engineers. But we really need to start that immediately. All other goals are longer term goals.
Exactly. There's no point in training all these 2 people if in fact the detector is not working, right?
So my suggestion is, why don't you start under that graduate school for gravitational waves, maybe at IUCA or IPR or RRCAT, because this kind of school is actually running for Indian Neutrino Observatory at TIFR. So every year, if you take, this year is too late for this kind of a program, but next year, if you take 10 students for this kind of school, by 2025, you will have 50 people trained, and they can easily contribute to this program.
Thank you. This has been discussed. Of course, this is a big working model that, of course, the nuclear physics industry started with the training school. The training school model has always been there. We have discussed this possibility, and we certainly will take this seriously. Anybody else? Satya, you had something else. This man.
I don't know whether we have time, but I can talk to Tarun. It was
we can talk later on. I mean, if anybody else? Yeah, Rajesh, go for
it. Just as an outsider, I mean, both Fred mentioned this 5 to 10% threshold that we have reached in all these years, and Ajith also mentioned about the scaling. But I just wanted to know, and you said that we need new ideas, but are there even just crazy ideas that people have, how for the scaling up is there? I mean, we are probably at a situation where one needs to even entertain crazy ideas to do something like that.
Do you have one?
No. So if you talk about scaling up of the physics community, the physics people who will use all the bountiful data which comes out of it, that is possible. That can be done, and because there is enough time for it. But what we should all be deeply worried about is the scaling up of the engineering expertise for immediate deployment. Okay, so we need to appoint half a dozen people within the next. As I said, we have taken in a few people into IUCA, but more engineering expertise is required. And the only thing I can say is that it is extremely important for an empowered committee to be appointed where these things can be done. Okay, one is the actual getting people to do the practical work on a short time scale, and then the next one is who is going to take up the challenge of running the project after the construction is done, and and how are they going to do it? Right, so who and how obviously will be linked together, and that also needs to be addressed. So at the moment, it is futile to just put out any idea because it always involves, let's go here, let's go there, let's bring somebody.
I think there are resources that exist now that are underutilized that we could utilize much more strongly. And some of it takes some funding. In some cases, funding exists. But I would say at first order, you should not be able to visit any gravitational wave observatory in the world and not find Indian students who are from an IIT or an ICER or a BITS working at that observatory. This is just a tremendous loss of opportunity. That's where you have to get them. We've learned that a long time ago. If you look at the people who've really succeeded in the US, the vast majority of them were once SURF students, which is the intern program there. The collaboration, the LIGO collaboration supports LIGO fellows. Over all the time that has existed, I think there have only been 4 LIGO fellows from India. There should never, these are people who stay for 3 months or more stays. There should never be less than several LIGO fellows from India. It's just a matter of supporting those students, and their support in the US is already paid for. The travel, getting them to the site and stuff, the only thing that's needed to be supplied is the students. And so, just taking advantage of those resources. There's a Newton Baba Fund, which could be used to hook people up with Geo Observatory. There's Virgo has an interest in seeing LIGO-India come online. And so I wouldn't go for CAGRA because CAGRA has a lot of challenges right now, so they would need more senior people to help out. But certainly, the big 3 plus Geo, you should not be able to go there without, smelling some Indian cooking going on.
Quick response to Rajesh's point. I think the best way good ideas come is you charge somebody with this responsibility. And from that day, that individual will start thinking about solutions, talking to people, will come up with it. Today, my gut feeling is no one is responsible for that. And that tells us.
I'll come back to this in a moment. But Ajith had a comment. It's okay?
Yeah.
Right. So, is there anybody else who has a question? So I think some of the important things that emerged from this discussion, there are now wild ideas. The wild idea probably would be to shut down a facility like the Super Collider to get everybody into LIGO as it happened. But the model that has worked quite well till now has been Rana Adhikari on his own has supported a few students every year from India, spending 3 months at his lab, and funded by an external agency. And one of the things that we have thought about is to replicate that in other LIGO science collaboration labs, so that and it easily can be scaled up by a factor of a few with the appropriate funding needed to support it. And the funding is a small amount compared to the big project money, but the human resources part of it essentially has been locked up in the money that's going to come. And I hope we can use that. The idea of the graduate school has been around for a while, and I think that if we can focus it on the tasks involved, can actually be a very good idea. We are open to ideas. It is true that we have been funding limited till now, but there are a lot of people here who come from various backgrounds, have various perspectives in this, and we are very open to ideas suggested to us, and we'll follow them through. We recognize that, as Fred said, the engineering student community, where some of the best students go in, the IITs and the IIITs and the BITS institutions, we've been targeting them to get students interested in this. A lot of the engineering community don't see the scientific projects like LIGO as an opportunity or as a career alternative because they don't know about it, and that process has started. On that mildly optimistic note, let's stop today for lunch by saying that we are open for ideas, and please get back to us. Thank you. Coffee, not lunch.